Why is variable resistance so important, especially when we're talking about rehabbing athletes? This is one of the most potent features of my mobility programming with athletes. Like, you get injured, you have joint pain, you have really stiff and weak muscles because they're trying to protect that joint. Things don't move around too well. And when you try to get back into exercise, when you're trying to do anything with any kind of impact, jumping and landing, or when you're throwing barbells around or just dumbbells, kettlebells, any kind of weight, it hurts. And so because of this, whenever you go through rehab with typical physiotherapy setups or osteopathy, the amount of resistance training they do is it's extraordinarily minuscule. So what happens, let's say you really hurt your elbow, you have like a biceps strain, or you get tennis elbow or something, and it's like, when I'm lifting dumbbells, it's really aggravating to the joint. And so what they do is that they have to use such a small weight or such a small band so that they can get a little bit of exercise in, but it doesn't really amount to anything that's actually going to stimulate an adaptation to grow and become stronger, because moving around 3 kilo weights didn't do anything for anybody. Moving around soup cans didn't really do much of anything for anybody. But when you have this idea of like free weights or resistance training, that is resistance training, or like these little TheraBands, that is resistance training, it's like, that's total crap, especially in the context for rehab. Now, that article that I posted at the very start of this video showing that variable resistance is superior to free weight training. And that is very true. When we're looking at building strength, like building that brute force, that brute strength, what happens, like when we say variable resistance, that means using bands, which is that when I stretch a band, I'm creating more and more resistance. So that allows me to subject my body to more and more force. You can go to Google Scholar and you can find lots of research talking on both ends of the spectrum on this. It's like equal amounts are promoting variable resistance, and the other half are promoting that free weights are far superior. And when you actually look into the research itself and look at how it's conducted, the one I posted at the start of this had people like mostly working on bench press, and it was like a bench press group who only used free weights versus the bench press group who used free weights with bands attached to the barbell, weighing them down so that it'd be X amount of weight here at the bottom, and then it's more weight here, and even more weight here at the top. So they're subjecting their body to even more stress. And this is something that's been known and been utilized since about the 1960s or 70s. As far as I know, Louis Simmons was the one who made it really big with Westside Barbell, because those guys found out that, hey, I can subject my body to even more force, I can stimulate then even more fatigue, and I can adapt even more. And then those guys went on to break even more world records that they had already previously set. They just kept on breaking their world records. Their story is absolutely insane. The issue is that if I can find it, I'll post it in the notes below this video, but there has been some research done on variable resistance saying that's absolute crap. And the way they conducted it was that there's a group of people who could use free weights, and they were allowed to use basically whatever weights they wanted to go through their reps and to build muscle, and they tested strength. I think they were primarily looking at bench press. That's typically what they look at for whatever reason. It's a very manly movement. You also notice that all these studies, it's only men that's ever in it. There's never women. Big surprise. So that the other group who used the bands for the variable resistance training, they were only allowed to use TheraBands, which the biggest one at peak tension goes up to like 14 kilos, or like maybe it was like 14 pounds, I think, like 7 kilos. That's pathetic. That's absolutely minuscule. That doesn't do anything for anybody. That's not enough force. So it's like that research, that whole study, that project, that was basically rigged from the start. It's not legitimate. It doesn't actually show anything. And what happens, like with all of the studies that demonstrate that variable resistance is not very good, they're using the most pathetic, tiniest little surgical hose of bands that's out there. They're tiny. They're pathetic. They don't supply any real resistance. The difference when we use something like the X3, though, and this is like the most powerful thing we have for rehabbing athletes in my practice, is that the X3 bands, they're made to actually supply some pretty damn high resistances. So like the regular black X3 band here, when it's just a single loop around the bar in this sort of setup, when I start to pull on that and it starts to go on tension, it starts off at around 27 kilos. And then if I take it up to my chest height, it goes up to more like, I think about 70 or 80 kilos at the top. So you can imagine here at the bottom, I'm not wearing the best shorts for this, but if I get here into the front rack, I'm already starting at somewhere between 30 or 40 kilos estimated. And then as I stand it up, it goes heavier and heavier up to a peak of about 80 kilos for this band. So if I'm going through reps like this, I'm being exposed to between, we'll just round it to about 30 to 80 kilos as I'm going through each rep. Now, how many foot-pounds is that per rep? It's a hell of a lot more than you would get with the barbell. Because if I'm using a barbell, let's say that it was an 80 kilo barbell. At the top, 80 kilos. At the bottom, 80 kilos. The problem here is that I am weakest at the bottom of my squat. As a posture, as a position, the bottom of your squat is the weakest position in the squat because everything is so stretched out. In the very bottom, if you go ass to grass, you cannot squeeze your bum. That means you can't use it effectively. And this is always something that we watch out for in terms of like scaling range of motion for our athletes. Like in CrossFit, if someone has like an injury or something going on and we need to scale how they're moving, we need to keep them in a range of motion where they can maintain active tension. Now, if you want to build muscle, if you want to build strength, there are two really big guiding factors that we have to observe. There's a lot of factors, but these are the two big ones that I observe, especially in my rehab practice, which is progressive overload. That's like the big classic one. You have to increase the amount of intensity you are being subjected to over time. We do this primarily through reps and through total resistance. So with my band there, and some people will be total smartasses being like, well, that's too heavy of a band for some people. It's like, dude, bands come in all shapes and sizes. Seriously, if anyone comments that, you're just a freaking moron. Bands come in all sizes. We can literally start someone with severe lower back pain or severe knee pain even, and start them on the smallest band that we can possibly get. That starts off at like 3 kilos. And then as they squat up with it, it goes up to even more. So it exposes their body to more force, to more resistance, creating fatigue that they will adapt to. Now, we need progressive overload. If we take that band and let's say you start off with 15 reps, that's our base minimum. You have to use a band size that you can do for 15 reps. And let's say you get to that 15. Good, cool. You're gonna do just that one set of 15. You're gonna go to maximum fatigue. And let's just say that max fatigue for you was 15 reps. The next time you do it, say about 48 hours later, your aim is 16 or more. You will have adapted to it. You gave your body a stimulus. You gave it an amount of force that it was subjected to. You made it get fatigued throughout your entire body. This is a very full body movement. It's not just your quads that get hit by a front squat like that. So what happens next, guys, is that you keep adding to the reps over and over and over again. Every 48 hours, you repeat the movement. You're just doing that one set to maximum fatigue. And that second time you do it, you may hit 20, you may hit 25. You keep going until you get to the point of you can't move that bar anymore. And then you're done. And then you stop. That's it. No need for multiple sets because you're able to increase the force much more than you could ever do with free weights. Free weights don't allow you to achieve those kinds of forces through that range of motion. So the second thing that we need a lot of is time under tension. In order to build strength, we need time in order to accrue that fatigue. So let's say that I had an 80 kilo barbell. How many reps could I do that? I know I can do 100. For me personally, I know I can do 100 kilos for at least 10 reps. We'll just say for 80 kilos, I could do 20 reps for that. Let's give it a different example. Let's just say for somebody else, like 100 kilos was their max for a front squat. So when we give them an 80 kilo barbell, how many reps can they actually do with that? Maybe more along the lines of like 5 reps, we'll say, we'll just make that up. And doing that is extremely exhausting. That's like their 5 rep max. This one though, it scales from 30 to 80 kilos, allowing you to pass through that sort of resistance, and people can get up to like 40 reps on that. And they're being exposed to that range of force over and over again. Once we can do 40 quality reps, and that's going to be upwards of about 2 minutes of solid tension. And there's another caveat with the X3 is that we always go slow and controlled. You start off 2 seconds up, 2 seconds down. I totally did my hand backwards there. I don't care. That's your cadence to start off with. We increase the cadence eventually, but 2 seconds down, 2 seconds up. You must keep the band on tension the entire time. No exceptions. The band does not go slack, meaning that you don't go so deep in your squat that the band goes slack and you get off tension. If you were to go that deep as well, not only would the band go slack, but your joints would also take more of the load because your muscles cannot activate when they're so stretched out like that. Like the bottom of a deadlift, when your butt, your lower back, and your hamstrings are so stretched out, that's where we always see the injuries. That's where people have the least capacity for producing strength and power. So it's like Thor Bjornsson, he still has the record of the deadlift for 501 kilos, I believe. I don't think anyone's broken that yet. He did that years ago, I think, like 3 or 4, 5 years ago. I don't know. Doesn't matter. If you were to raise the platform, so let's say he was starting off with the bar at his knees rather than about his mid-shin, he'd be able to pull way more than that. Because the higher you go in your squat and your deadlift position, the stronger you are. Same thing with a squat. The higher you are, the stronger you are. At the top of a squat, you're strongest. At the bottom of it, you're weakest. That's the thing. It makes sense, and that's how it works. You can understand this. So with the X3, let's say, remember this context is for broken athletes, for people who have like horrible knee injuries. Maybe they blew out their meniscus a few years ago, they had surgery and things were never really right again. Or someone herniated a disc in their lower back 20 years ago and now they're overweight, they can't really move around too well. This allows us to scale your range of motion to where you are strongest. We are working through your strongest, most optimal ranges of motion and strengthening that. And what that does is it actually enhances your range of motion because afterwards when you're done, you have more range of motion. Whereas when you typically do free weight exercises, you get done and you're really stiff and tight. There's a reason for that, and that's because of how it stimulates your body to get stronger. It's very different. But when we use variable resistance, you don't get muscle soreness because you're not damaging yourself in order to build up. You're instead invoking this adaptation. You give your body this amount of force, and it adapts to that. And that goes along with your skeleton and your connective tissue as well. So with the X3, we get much greater levels of variable resistance. The deadlift on that bar has been shown to support over 1,000 pounds. There have been people to deadlift and get over 500 kilos of resistance on the bar. So we have another bar, the force bar, that actually measures the resistance it's being subjected to and displays it via an app on your phone. And so you can actually see in real time the amount of load you're moving. I don't have one yet, but when I do, I'm going to start posting all my workouts with like my screen being shown. Like we can actually see the forces going on in real life, in real time. I'm so excited for that. It's going to be so cool. But does this make sense? Variable resistance. When we're talking about building strength and muscle, especially for rehabbing athletes, this is incredibly, extraordinarily important because lifting free weights is a complete and total waste of time. It does not work for broken athletes. What does work is variable resistance, where I can get progressive overload and literally overload my muscles. Dr. Peter Attia talks about this. I'm going to take how he phrases this, which I think is brilliant. He's like, one of the biggest problems that we have with weightlifting and most like fitness stuff is that when we're using free weights, when we're using like metal weights, barbells and stuff, we are overloading the joint and underloading the muscle. When we use the X3 properly, how it's meant to be done, we appropriately load the joints and we overload the muscle. We give it something massive, a massive amount of force to adapt to and a massive amount of fatigue to adapt to. And that invokes a great adaptation and makes you a hell of a lot stronger, a hell of a lot leaner, and a hell of a lot more flexible as well. It doesn't take away your flexibility. You don't really have to do any stretching. I never cool down after this, and I maintain full range of motion everywhere. I can wake up first thing in the morning and just go straight into a squat. I don't have to practice squatting because I'm not exercising in a way that damages my joints, that damages my muscles, and takes away from my flexibility. That's important to me. So is variable resistance superior to free weights? Yes, absolutely. There's no question about that. Is it superior for hypertrophy and getting like really big muscles? Probably not. And if that's what you're looking for, there are probably other hypertrophy standards. Why that is, I don't specifically know. People get ripped, people get absolutely shredded on the X3, but as we're becoming like, if you're into bodybuilding, maybe if you're trying to get as big as possible, I don't know. I'm not the one to ask about that. I'm not someone who's trying to train like that. I'm not the biggest person in the world. I weigh 80 kilos. But point is that when we're trying to rehab athletes, we need to be taking care of the joints, building joint health, and also building your skeletal muscle as much as possible. Using dinky weights, using tiny little surgical hose for bands that don't achieve any force, it doesn't work. The X3 basically starts you off at like 15 kilos and works its way up to over 300 kilos. And we can arrange things so that we can get over 500 kilos. Most people aren't going to need to get up to that point, but that's not the point. The point is that it has that sort of range that it can safely support, and people can get there with practice. Makes your rehab time hell of a lot faster, and there's no question about that. So guys, if you have any questions at all about the X3, I am a huge supporter of it. It is what I almost exclusively use for training, with a little bit of CrossFit here and there, as I am a CrossFit coach. But yeah, if you have any questions at all about it, please feel free to ask, and I'll be happy to answer any questions you guys have. Take care.